Liz, would it be fair to say that Part A more than likely relates directly back to, I guess, to the reporting entity, which to our industry was more than likely the institution or the bank, that is, would be the reporting entity, not necessarily the broker, although it could be the broker. And in that case, the lender would also be scrutinising for AML compliance or potential issues there, the actual distribution network as being, if you like, one of their customers, in the fact that the broker is introducing loans to that bank. And so it would be reasonable to expect that banks will be doing a higher level of due diligence on brokers who refer business into them to ensure that possibly they're not dealing with somebody who is linked to terrorism or laundering activities. Would that be reasonable?
I think that would be reasonable.
Yeah.
I think that it will be reasonable, though, for banks and other institutions to take into account whether or not a broker is in fact a reporting entity in their own right, and therefore whether they will be subject to scrutiny by AUSTRAC, as opposed to brokers who perhaps aren't subject to that sort of scrutiny.
I think there's many brokers out there that have to realise if they are deemed as being a reporting entity, the regime that they have to comply to is significant. It's not a simple little exercise that one can just skip down the park with. It takes a bit of work. I've read it and it's quite complex. With Part B, we're especially thinking of the identification processes. I see there just about every broker in Australia, and there's somewhere between 15 to 20,000 of them somewhere, depending on what figures you want to look at. The identification processes, a lot of our industry probably already does. I think there's a higher level it's going to go to as well, especially if there is potential suspicious matter to be reported. How long are these records going to be kept for? And whether there's suspicious matter or not, is there a length of period of time that records have to be retained?
Yeah, there are requirements in the Act for record retention. In relation to customer identification records, that period is the life of the relationship plus another 7 years. One thing we should make clear in relation to brokers, though, if they are not an AFSL holder, then they are not reporting entities for the purpose of this legislation. However, their principals, the people who are actually making the loans that they're arranging, may wish to use them as their agents for customer identification processes, and in those cases they will be subject to the primary reporting entities Part B program rather than having to have their own. And my understanding is that most mortgage brokers are not AFSL holders.
Correct.
Yeah.
I might just ask Andrew. Andrew, obviously you're been broking in this country for a while, and you understand the marketplace extremely well. And I'm just wondering, what's your assessment of how your organisation is going to address this and the potential impact you see as a broker to the industry?
Well, I suppose it was interesting when I got asked to talk on the anti-laundering legislation, in that I'd probably understand the basics of the legislation. I'd say I'd understand 20 to 25% of the basics of the legislation. But as to the practicalities of how we are going to run with the legislation, what we have to do to comply with it, that is where I think both myself and staff, we need a fair bit of training on that side of things. And I've heard there's, I suppose, getting so close to that 12th of December, you keep on sort of putting that back. But I think that's the key for me, and this has probably opened my eyes up a bit, in that we really probably have to have that training to understand those practicalities, Peter. That's
So you would already have a certain level of training that you'd normally conduct through the business. Do you see this as going to be a burden in addition to that, or something you think you can complement what you're already doing?
Oh, it's obviously going to take out time from the business to train up the staff, and they'll have to go to external courses, because I believe that all your staff should understand the legislation from the admin through to the loan writers. I think it's important that everyone understands it. So it is a time-consuming thing, and when you're trying to write business, it doesn't help. But at the same time, I think we've got to be part of helping the legislation out. But there's extra costs, I suppose, involved as well. So.